Hello and welcome once again to Voices of Agriculture here on RFD. This week we're coming to you from the Lone Star State of Texas, where the rains have returned to many locales around the state, but we're a long way from breaking the drought. We're going to report this week on 2 trips to Europe and to Canada, as our board of directors here at the Texas Farm Bureau is once again spanning the globe on the Global Agricultural Education Tours. First up, a trip to Russia and Estonia. Matt Felder went along and he files this report.
Mention the country of Russia and thoughts of the iconic Red Square or the famed palace-laden city of St. Petersburg may pop into your mind. However, the natural resource-rich country is quickly becoming known for its agriculture potential.
One of the farmers asked me what I thought about their operation, and I said, y'all need to slow down because within 10 to 15 years, with the amount of natural resources and good land, once they have the capital structure and once they have the machinery and the technology, look out, Russia's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the world market.
Russians still believe in the idea that bigger is better. Former Soviet state farms are now privately owned, averaging 50,000 to 130,000 hectares. These privately owned operations are only a few years in the making. Most tend to be vertically integrated, where grains produced go to feed the animal operations.
When you see how large those operations are, it's difficult for me to see how they can really manage them the way they can. They can't put their personal stamp on it, those owners.
In the southern part of the country, close to the Ukraine, lie vast amounts of land in the Black Earth region, similar to the Blacklands of central Texas. Cereal grains and sunflower fields stretch for miles. However, crop yields are less than what is found in the U.S., even though more land is farmed. Milk production per cow is also down, as dairies worldwide are losing money. Newer seed technologies, fertilizer applications, and updated farm practices are not utilized to the extent they are in the U.S., but agriculture growth is happening at a rapid pace. Government plans are to invest $41 billion between 2008 and 2012, increasing agriculture production by more than 20%. In Russia, chicken is king. The affordable white meat is so popular, chicken producers cannot keep up with demand.
I was impressed. I think they're on pace with their goal, and that is to be self-sufficient. As they get more infrastructure and become accustomed to this free enterprise system, I predict there will be a force in the poultry industry.
The U.S. is the top supplier of chicken to Russia, but those exports will most likely drop in years to come. Other U.S. exports are moving in the wrong direction, dropping from 10 to 6% in 2008. The country continues to trade with the more conveniently located European Union. Despite such downward trends, opportunities are arising that could increase trade.
As the income increases in these countries, I think they'll be looking at beef as an import here more in some of the high-end restaurants where they will have. I think that's our main thing that we'll see some growth in. Hopefully, is our beef exports.
Interest is growing as Russia has no beef cattle tradition. What is produced within the borders comes mainly from dairy cattle. Such a marble beef tradition would take decades to develop. On the flip side, only a small fraction of fertilizer developed in Russia is actually used within the borders. The country's largest mineral fertilizer producer, Eurochem, is searching for buyers.
We import their products into the U.S. It's going through the same people that holding the prices up. We discussed maybe establishment of a group of purchasers to purchase directly from Eurochem to get a better price. There's a lot of risk involved in that.
Increasing relationships with organizations such as the Association of Russian Farmers, companies, and U.S. officials alike has led to a foundation of possibilities.
We see where there's opportunity for some trade areas, some barriers that we've got that we can work through, especially working with some of the farm organizations over here and direct with the farmer.
Nestled along the Baltic Sea and Gulf of Finland, the tiny country of Estonia is dwarfed by its neighbors, encompassing just a little over 17,000 square miles. Still, 1/3 of Estonian territory is agricultural lands, producing cereal grains, oil plants, hay, vegetables, milk, and pork. Plots in Estonia are much like those found in Texas, smaller and owned by individuals. Equipment is more advanced than what is commonly found in Russia, but like its large neighbor to the east, production yields are not on par with the U.S.
They can do a lot of improving on their production, and they're trying to cut down on use of fertilizer and using the GMO seeds and stuff. They're not using them at all because they're in the EU. They're going to have a hard pull too. They're importing most of their food and their stuff already, and they're going to have a hard time if they don't change some of their ways.
That keeps the door open for increased trade. Swapping goods between the U.S. and Estonia has picked up, growing some 8 to 9% in 2008. Estonia joined the European Union in 2004, and the agriculture industry has received a lot of assistance ever since. The EU does bring more regulations, but the consensus among the locals is that farming is now better off. Despite all the efforts, the small size of the Baltic state makes it difficult for farmers to churn out large amount of goods that would be beneficial to the U.S.
Estonians will be probably limited because of their location and their range of products that they produce, but they are gearing up for the kind of things that will offer the European Union countries an opportunity to enjoy that is different from those other states in the Union.
While the 2-week tour allowed for only a snapshot of the agriculture operations, it's clear that challenges know no boundaries. As the industry continues to grow overseas, so does the opportunity for Texas producers. For Voices of Agriculture, Matt Felder, Russia and Estonia.
Thank you, Matt. We'll have more of Voices of Agriculture right after this.
It's a grassroots voice in Austin and Washington for farmers and ranchers like me.
It's educational and scholarship opportunities for young people like me.
It's money-saving benefits for member families
Like us.
What is Texas Farm Bureau? I am.
I am. I am.
As we return to Voices of Agriculture, we have with us today George Caldwell, who is the Associate Commodity Director. And George, you went on the trip to Canada. We just saw a report from Matt on the Russian trip. Canada's a good bit different.
Yeah, Gene, it's very interesting in relationship to how much we have in common with our partners to the north.
No language barriers like you had in Russia. What are some of the things that Canadian farmers and U.S. farmers, Texas farmers have in common?
Well, as you know, Canada is one of our largest trade partners for the United States, and so it's very important that we look for ways to enhance our trade that we have with each other and how that we can harmonize that trade to continue this very good trading relationship we have. So it was an excellent opportunity for us to go and establish better relations with them, but to look at the challenges that they see from their perspective as well as ours.
I think we need to be very careful about things we do because we don't want to mess that up. But they're good trading partners with us in very many different ways. And, we send products to them, and they send products to us.
There's no doubt that we depend on each other. I mean, and a good relationship when it comes to trade and stuff seems to me that will benefit all of us.
What are some of the things that the group traveled to and witnessed during the trip?
Well, we had an opportunity to meet with some of the government officials with their agriculture industry to look and discuss with them what the challenges they saw. One of the biggest challenges was a concern of through our latest federal programs and change through some of our emergency programs, we have a Buy American clause that has put a challenge on some of the products and some of the things that they trade into our market that has limited companies here in the United States to use. And so that was a concern. They wanted us to understand their perspective. We had the opportunity to meet with a dairy and kind of discuss where they are. You know, dairy prices in our country, dairy producers are struggling immensely in trying to survive. And so we had an opportunity to talk to them. Their system is somewhat different because they continue to work with a quota system that regulates their production and what's on the market there.
We see a considerable amount of government control or government intervention, I guess maybe is the word that they like to use, in their systems. And as we face the possibility of more government being involved in our business, maybe we need to look at where they've come, whether it's hurt or helped them some in some instances, and be very, very careful about where we go as to how deeply the government becomes involved in the business of agriculture and the business of taxes and economics.
There's a lot more control than we have in the States over these different industries, that producers are limited on what they can do, and to make changes, they have to go through numerous steps and sometimes very expensive steps to expand.
George, this is the second trip that Texas Farm Bureau leaders have made to Canada. In fact, I went along on the 2006 trip. What changes, what's different between now and then?
Well, I think we saw a couple of changes. One, we're beginning to see a different sentiment among producers in relation to the Canadian Wheat Board. As their law dictates, all export wheat has to go through the Wheat Board. But there's a number of producers beginning to shift to want to see that law change where it would be voluntary. That way, if they want to market their wheat outside of the Wheat Board, they would like to get that reward from the market. There's also a lot of challenges with cool, how things will be labeled, and there's been a large industry in Canada of selling weaning pigs to the United States, for example, and the challenge of that mixed label of weaning pigs grown there and fed out in the United States, and the same thing with cattle and how that relates into that labeling system and how that will essentially move out is a big challenge.
And of course, cool being country of origin labeling on products, and that's really a challenge on both sides of the border, isn't it?
Very definitely. We see that we have a big marketplace, and how we work towards that labeling that gives food protection the necessary requirements and the necessary protections that it needs, but yet doesn't prohibit trade, is a very big challenge.
They're very concerned about what's happening to the swine industry with the cool, and I know that it's one thing that they're getting ready to address, and talking to some of the people that if it gets bad enough, they're going to go to the WTO.
The Texas Farm Bureau has never been in favor of cool, so it's kind of refreshing to come up here and hear their reasonings that they're having problems with it, and it's the same concerns. We really don't see the reasons. It doesn't do anything for safety of food.
And of course, Canada, along with the United States and Mexico, comprise NAFTA, one of agriculture's real success stories. What's the sentiment in Canada for maintaining NAFTA?
Well, our growers especially see NAFTA, and as we've looked in other trips in Europe and how products move more freely across borders, it's enhanced trade there. And so our producers and our leaders have seen that we need to do more things to harmonize trade, to allow products to move more freely. But yet in regards to food safety, we know we have to put those type issues at the forefront to where we maintain a very consistent food safety product for our consumers.
Their timber production is quite different from ours, since it's crown land and owned by the provincial government. They have an abundance of it, and I can understand why they have import-export problems.
What really amazed me is when we went to the feed yards, the quality of cattle they had, and the ability to put the fat on them in such extreme weather. In this area, the weather would be, minus 5 to 20 degrees, and these animals will put on from 3 to 3.5 pounds per day on the ration that they feed the animals.
Our leaders have been around the world on this. What do you think is the feeling about continuing to travel and promote these kinds of exchanges?
Well, our goal in the very beginning of these trips was to learn about other producers, learn about ag in other countries, because we realize we don't compete at home anymore. We compete in a global marketplace, and for us to have a better understanding of how we compete, but also how we complement each other in these situations is very important. And for us to be leaders in our industry and to help lead policy for our own federal government and other regulations, we've got to have a good, clear understanding of what's going on in the marketplace in the world.
It's very important to keep those trades open. Otherwise, nobody gets anywhere with it. We need that relationship.
I think that our relationship is growing and will continue to grow. I think we'll always have struggles, especially in times when economics are a little more difficult. I think we're going to ultimately, though, have to look at ways that we can become a better trading bloc from the Americas with
the Canadian and the United States producers so that we can be a better trading bloc to the rest of the world.
What's the talk about where you might be headed next?
Well, there's been several countries that have kind of been discussed, but we really haven't arrived at any decision. We know that Japan is a very large marketplace for us, and it's important for us to maintain those relations with them and at how we maybe can expand the markets. They are a very large purchaser of our grains and our beef. We also have a lot of trade relations and opportunities with the countries of Taiwan, Vietnam, and so there's several discussions. In the Middle East, you have India now as one of the burgeoning markets similar to China. And so there's a lot of things to discuss as we go forward as they make that selection for next year.
Well, George, welcome back to Texas, and thank you for joining us on Voices of Agriculture. We'll have more right after this.
Agriculture is Texas' renewable industry, not only growing food and fiber for Texas families, but creating 1 in 5 Texas jobs. I'm Mike Barnett, editor of Texas Agriculture. In our publication, you'll read profiles of the trendsetters of agriculture in the Lone Star State. We'll bring you profiles of farmers and ranchers surviving and thriving on the land and the issues shaping the future of rural Texas. Read all about it in Texas Agriculture, an exclusive benefit of your Texas Farm Bureau membership.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the show today, rains have returned to many parts of Texas following the epic drought of 2009. Ed Wolf has a couple of stories, the first being how has all this affected the Texas ranching industry? Here's Ed's report.
Clouds loom overhead as Murray Rudolph puts out range cubes for his hungry cows, but the likelihood of any rain is slim to none. Murray's ranch near Kennedy is in the center of the single driest location in the United States. Since the first of the year, South Texas has been in what climatologists have dubbed an exceptional drought.
When it finally decided to quit, it quit. And we've been fighting it ever since about the end of '07. Tanks are starting to go dry now, running short on hay. It's always a constant battle.
While his Karnes County ranch has seen a few sporadic showers throughout the year, many of his neighbors have not been so lucky. Some haven't cranked their combines in 2 years, and even when Murray took his hay equipment out of the barn, he made just 175 bales, barely more than last year.
When you feed 400 to 500 to 600 bales every winter, the odds aren't matching up. It's getting slimmer and slimmer every year.
No rain means no runoff, which means no tank water. Wells only strike salt water in this dusty stretch of South Texas, so Murray has to rely on the local utility to water his cattle. He is also a third-generation conservation contractor, so his bulldozers and trucks have actually been paying his bloated water bills. In fact, some parts of that business have actually picked up in the last few months, especially hauling cattle to market.
That's been pretty steady. There's cattle going to market every week just by the thousands, and it's keeping us pretty busy.
Sale barns across the southern portions of the state are seeing increasing cattle numbers with every dry week. Roy Wheeler with the Atascosa Livestock Exchange in Pleasanton says he hasn't seen anything like it in his 50-plus years in the business. He estimates that 2/3 of the cattle in Atascosa County have been sold.
People are bringing their cattle in because it costs too much to feed them. You can't buy hay. Hay is too expensive. Tubs, we're using molasses tubs. They're too expensive. We fed up the calves. Now we're feeding up the cows.
With the diminishing cattle numbers, the very dynamics of the business could take on a new feel in the months ahead. Roy says it's impossible to make any money right now, and those who sell out may not have enough collateral for banks to lend them money to restock when it does start raining. One bright spot in an otherwise bleak situation is that for those who do decide to sell, cattle prices have remained strong, in large part to out-of-state buyers looking for a bargain.
We've had some buyers from Oklahoma, some from Missouri, a few from West Colorado.
They're catching 4, 5, 6 buyers coming out of Louisiana and Arkansas, and they are keeping the prices up.
Many of Murray's cows have already been through the local sale in Kennedy, as he has been forced to downsize his herd because of the dry conditions. He says if things don't improve soon, then many more are destined for the sale barn.
I've still got about 220 mama cows right now, and if we don't make any more hay, I'm going to have to probably cut that in half to make it on the hay that I do have left for the winter.
But Murray is quick to point out that things will turn around, eventually. It's this kind of optimism and determination that keeps him going with parched ground and an uncertain future.
Like my dad always told me, he said, we're a day closer every day to a good rain. So all we can do is hope and pray that it'll turn around one day.
For Voices of Agriculture, I'm Ed Wolf in Kennedy.
And you may not have considered just how has this epic drought affected the wildlife in those regions. Here again, Ed Wolf.
Though rain has finally begun to fall in some of the drought-stricken parts of South Texas, for many farms and ranches, the damage has already been done. Damage like the loss of 60-year-old hackberry trees on the Temple Ranch near Freer, which boasted a traditional cow-calf operation till just over a decade ago when their focus turned to wildlife. Those hackberry trees are a major source of habitat for the Rio Grande turkey, just one species of wildlife native to this Duval County ranch. Robert Sanders has been the driving force behind bringing this 12,000-acre patch of South Texas back to what it once was. But the recent lack of moisture has taken its toll.
We've had low fawn recruitments. We've had almost no turkey reproduction, very low quail reproduction. If it wasn't for the few things that we do, like supplemental feeding and artificial watering, we would be really, really bad shape.
With the lack of rain comes a lack of forbs and grasses that serve as food for wildlife. Robert has implemented a year-round feeding program so no animal has to travel more than about a half a mile for feed or water. These practices have become more crucial in this part of the state where rainfall isn't as reliable as it used to be.
Every wildlife biologist in South Texas, we're preparing ourselves for the drought because we know there's one coming. Now, we didn't know it was going to be this bad, but we're always digging new water tanks, ponds, cleaning them out, piping water to concrete water troughs.
Robert has also begun building artificial roosts for the turkeys, making use of old windmill parts and placing them where the hackberries once thrived. Stephen Vocal, a field technician with Texas A&M, has been studying the birds' progress, or lack thereof, over the last couple years. With no successful nests on the ranch this year, he's not exactly sure how they're surviving.
I guess they just hold tight and wait out for a good year, because when they have a good year, they produce quite a bit. They stay around water, they've been staying grouped up, they're not really trying to breed at all.
Turkeys aren't the only species on the ranch affected by the lack of rainfall. Since the bobwhite quail live only 2 to 3 years, it takes just a couple of dry years, which this ranch has already exceeded, to set them back. Even the Temple Ranch's most popular resident, the white-tailed deer, looks meager compared to years past.
There's a few deer we've been watching, and even though they have supplemental feed, and it's not the same as having good forbs and brush for them to browse on.
This brush also serves as cover for these animals, which means they are more susceptible to predators, which are themselves hungrier than normal. As the wildlife population goes down, so does the ability for ranchers to support the amount of hunters that flock into this area every year, which in turn means less money to put back into wildlife management. For Voices of Agriculture, I'm Ed Wolf in Freer, Texas.
We'll be back in just a moment on Voices of Agriculture.
Decades ago, Americans started leaving the farm for other professions and pursuits. The farmers that stayed fed America and much of the world. Today we grow more food than ever, and it's better, safer, and healthier. We live in the land of plenty, thanks to modern agricultural technology and the skills of our farm and ranch families. This message is brought to you by the Texas Farm Bureau, the voice of Texas agriculture. Today's abundance of food and fiber is brought to you by America's farmers and ranchers.
Well, that's our show for this week. Thank you for joining us in Texas on Voices of Agriculture. If there's something you'd like to see on our show or make a comment, ask a question, please send me an email. Visit our website at www.txfb.org. From all of us here at Voices of Agriculture, this is Gene Hall. We'll see you next time.